Hey, Jimmy. I guess we're here again in another episode of this podcast, the Verge Technologies Podcast. And, talking offline, you and me together, a topic came up and I really wanted to dig into this. And that is, thinking about cloud convergence and all of the cloud players, AWS, Azure, Google, Oracle, et cetera. What are the barriers that these other players or your competitors or what have you are throwing up to enterprises that are preventing them from operating within a converged cloud environment?
Good, very good question, and a lot of different ways we could tackle that. So, if you think about it, if you think about the enterprise needs to run their distributed operations, across multi-site footprints, right? And you think about, well, what are the needs I have to be able to do that? And then you look at the business models of, let's say, the cloud service providers out there, the public ones, right? Or you look at even the service companies that are out there, like the Accentures and Deloittes and HPs and Dells of the world, right? And there is a disconnect between the services that are offered and how the business enterprise needs to operate, right? They need to have visibility across their enterprise. They need management tools that will span different compute environments, whether you have like a proprietary data center or whether you have some of your applications and databases in AWS or Azure or Oracle or Google or IBM or whoever, right? And managing those is important to the enterprise to be able to manage, of course, vertically within those different compute and cloud environments, but manage also horizontally across those so that you can provision, manage, get one view of all of your assets in one place, and then manage and apply policy to those assets in a consistent manner that will allow you to manage both planes, both vertically and horizontally. That holistic view is absolutely missing because everyone is kind of working in a silo and they're concerned about their own cloud and getting you in their cloud because that's how they make revenue if you're in their cloud. And they don't want you to leave their cloud, so they're going to make it especially difficult for you to ever leave. So the cloud providers don't have really a vested interest to go solve this problem for the enterprise, being able to manage across the enterprise footprint. And if you look at then the service companies, the Accentures and Deloittes and all those guys, and you say, well, what is their business model? Well, they're a service company. They make money off services and services that they sell to their customers, right? And so they would be glad to come in and tack you up a custom solution for different database managements or connect a bridge so you can move data between AWS and Google, for example, right?
Right.
And, they'll sign you up to a 10-year contract to maintain that and everybody's happy, right? Mm-hmm. And so they make money off of services, selling expertise, selling bodies to their customers for specific purposes. But just like the cloud providers, the end result of that is you're locked into that service provider. I mean, to that service company, right? Yeah. For years. Okay. And so again, the business model of those and the service companies might be a little closer to the enterprise because they do take the whole enterprise into consideration. The end result of both of those models is not necessarily what the enterprise needs, right?
Right.
And the business models run contrary to being able to scale and operate a business process without regard to where it's hosted, how it's hosted, and who's doing the end management of your operations, right? We need a holistic view that will allow you to view all of your assets, allow you to manage all of those assets, predict outcomes for the workloads that those assets are processing. And at the end of the day, lower your outages, lower your downtime, and improve and optimize your performance. All that's possible if you take that holistic management view of managing both vertically and horizontally, and then coupling all of that together.
Yeah. I think that you said something that was key there, which is, not having to depend on location or
Right.
infrastructure, right?
Right.
But and in a recent LinkedIn post that you wrote, organizing around business logic as opposed to infrastructure boundaries, right?
Yes, I agree 100%. So in today's world, uh, those those compute environments, whether they're your own, like a proprietary data center, or whether they're the Googles and Oracles and Azures of the world, they create kind of what I'm going to call a vertical silo, right? And then they charge you fees to move your data, especially if you want to move it out of their silo to another silo, right? And so what the business enterprise needs to be able to do is manage across those boundaries and barriers as if it's one environment. So it doesn't matter where it's hosted. It doesn't matter any of, what your particular SLA is, because if you can manage all of that in a more holistic manner, right? A federated management model is what I would call that, where you're looking at all of it. Then you can optimize your business processes. You can lower the cost of your business processes, and you can be more competitive in opening new markets and being able to react to changing market conditions. Right.
Right. Right. Okay. Well, that's fascinating. So I wanted to dig into a little bit more deeply into sort of like definitions, because I know that you spoke to some people. I don't know if you want to mention who you were speaking to or not, but
Probably not, but yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
But they're
A well-known analyst company.
highly respected,
An
famous
industry analyst company.
analyst company with deep pockets. And one of the things that you brought up was that there's not even a common definition for what is commonly used as database management or management in general. So I was wondering if you could lead us into that conversation.
Yes, sure. It was kind of an epiphany to me when I really started working across and looking at what industry analysts were saying and how the market's changing and growing, declining, how fast it's growing, all of those things. And it really depends a lot on how you group definitions, right, around the work these platforms or products are doing, right? So what I found is that industry analysts are covering a lot of different products without really what I think is a common definition of what even database management is, much
Right.
less database management on a hybrid or multi-cloud environment, right? And so, most of what I see out there are monitoring tools or alerting tools, reporting tools, that monitor performance to some degree, and they tell you that something is either broke or it's going to be broke, right? But it's up to you to then to react to that in some timely manner to prevent that, right?
Right.
And so that in many circles is called management.
Right.
I
Just
don't call
observing
that.
something, just monitoring something is called
Yeah,
like
yeah,
management.
that's management. I'm managing. So when people talk about managing hybrid cloud or multi-cloud environments, what they're really talking about is for the most part that management of that vertical silo, right? And they're only talking about a lot of, in many cases, only monitoring, right? Now then, there's exceptions to that. AWS, for example, has a whole bunch of different tools depending upon what you might want to do to an application or a database, right? As far as moving it, migrating it to an, better network performance, lots of different characteristics. They have tools or sets of tools that can do that. But I guess what AWS and most of those tools are kind of a la carte, right? You get charged for them specifically for what you want to do. And so what that kind of brings up is that they don't really have the glue to glue all that together, right? To make an
Mhm.
integrated platform end to end that covers all the care and feeding of like a database or an application,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
That can do migration, automated migration, replication, scaling, all of those things under one system. And so for really be able to take a holistic view of your assets and then manage those, you need to be able to have platforms or tool sets, if you would, that can reach across those cloud boundaries and reach in vertically and manage those within and across the enterprise. The enterprise footprint is not just in one place or the other. It's in a lot of places. They have typically a very distributed footprint just because of the nature of their business, right? Some of it's international, some of it's national, some of it's state, right? Or local.
Yeah.
So being able to do that management within and across all those environments is what we're calling cloud convergence, or managing many clouds as one cloud.
Right. Yeah. And actually managing, because I think that
Yeah,
I was having a conversation with somebody the other day, actually, where, they talk about how, that he was talking about the difference between automation and autonomous AIs, which I think is kind of analogous to what we're talking about,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Which
yeah,
is, if you're going to do management, you're going to actually have something that has the power to make a decision that can actually take some kind of action, as
absolutely.
opposed to something that's just going to tell, just going to alert you. It's going to, be a tattletailer and say,
Right,
well,
right,
this
right.
happened, are you going to do something
Yeah,
about
yeah,
it?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, sorry you didn't get back to me soon enough. This database fell over. Yeah, yeah, right. So, yes, so if you just are doing kind of the monitoring, alerting, reporting, then you're not going to be able to create AI based, what I'm going to call self managing and self healing environments where they're monitoring workloads or monitoring critical attributes of database and applications. And then based upon the rule sets that you put around the AI, they can take action. They can move the application or the database to a larger server. They can scale it out and cluster it across many different servers to increase the processing bandwidth. It can replicate, backup, migrate, and do all of that while it's running. You don't have to take it down to do that, right? So we're talking about the management of live databases and applications within and across all different cloud environments on the planet. And we're talking about the ease of viewing those from a holistic standpoint from one console and ensuring that all of that stays working, right? And not only stays working, that the performance of all those assets meet your service levels that you have promised your customer.
Yeah. So, you just touched on something that is kind of a pet peeve of mine, which is that famous maintenance window. Like every now and then, my bank will send me, oh, we're going to have a maintenance window between this time and that time on Sunday, or, and that's kind of like the conventional wisdom of IT and of technology. That's the common accepted conventional wisdom. So why don't we kind of slay some sacred cows over here? Why should, and you kind of talk about how we shouldn't have to put up with any downtime, right? So if you could get into that a little bit more, because I think that's one of those areas that I think that really needs to change. And you're kind of, you provide the alternative view that it doesn't, we don't have to have downtime.
Absolutely. But we absolutely do not. And so if you look at just let's say that the maintenance of an application or a database, you say, well, I've got to take this thing down because I need to do these patches. I need to do patches to the operating system. I need to do patches to the database or application because they come out with new releases. I've got to take it down in order to do that, right? And so you say, man, that's a lot of downtime. And not only is it a lot of downtime, it's a lot of drag to all of your existing operations resources, right? Because you got to coordinate that, you got to plan for that, you got to do the back out plans for that, you got to do everything to ensure that you can get it done in whatever your maintenance window is. But what if you could just take that workload that's running on that database and migrate it while it's running, while it's live, to another server, a swing server, let's say, and then perform your maintenance on that server and then just migrate it back again live, no downtime. And so if you think about doing it in that manner, then what you're really doing is you're eliminating the real need for that maintenance window, right? Because once you move that workload off of its original server, you can do all the maintenance, all the testing, everything that you need to do before you move that workload back, right? And so being able to do that with zero downtime is huge, right? And so you may have downtime for a different reason, right? If you could cut out 75% of your maintenance windows and your downtime for your end customer, that would be a huge benefit to them, cost savings. They wouldn't have an interrupted processing on their end. And you're going to retain that customer a whole lot better than your competitor that can't do that, right? Same thing with the performance issues, right? So performance issues today, well, it's running sluggish. I need to take down this database, for example, and I'm going to move it from a medium-sized server to a large server because I need more throughput. So you take it down, you copy that database over, you stop all the transactions from happening while you're doing that, this downtime. Then you're going to sync it all back up, let all those transactions sync up and start doing it again. But what if you could take a live database that's processing transactions at runtime and just move that database from one server to another network, to another location, anywhere in the world? What if you could do that with zero downtime? Your end users having access to that database all the time that it was being migrated, and still accomplish that with zero downtime, right? And zero interruption to your customers. That's what we've built. That's what we can do to help the enterprise stay up and meet their obligations.
I mean, it sounds like a dream come true. I mean, can you imagine what that'll do to SLAs, right?
Yes.
Like what?
Yeah, we have on the products that we've built, we have an SLA assurance module that will be able to help map the different rules and AI sets that we need to put around that database to ensure that no matter what your SLA is, that you can be assured that we can meet it.
Right. Well, and maybe even like improve SLA commitments. Like, what's the typical?
Yeah.
You know, what's the typical like SLA commitment? You know, from cloud providers or you know.
Yeah. So
go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. So, data centers used to really try to meet certain service levels, right? I mean, they were, if your service level was, 4 nines, they would try to meet it, right? If it was 5 nines, they would try to meet it, right? Whatever your service levels were. And that is but that's really on the hardware, right? That's not on what's running on it, right? So
Right.
if you start to couple then what's being hosted by that hardware, and you start factoring in, well, what's the application reliability, right? How good is the application in handling performance, right? And what if the application, not the hardware, runs into a bottleneck? Then how do I scale my application across more servers, right? Until I can fix the processing algorithms within the applications, right? So being able to do that management from an automated standpoint to ensure those SLAs are always met and that action that can always be taken dramatically lowers any outages that you may have, dramatically lowers your downtime, which dramatically lowers your OPEX and CAPEX because it's a more efficient, and lowers the touch.
Yes.
One of the things I learned as a CIO is that the more times you touch an application or a database, the more likely it is you're going to do something that's going to take it down, right? So typically the less touch, the better, right?
Yeah.
And so or to be very focused for very specific things. Just going in and start troubleshooting is what we're trying to avoid.
So that's interesting, about during your CIO days, the more something was touched, the more, the higher the probability that something can go wrong with that
Yep.
application. I think
Right.
that's great. You've been on the other side. You've been in
Yeah.
your client's shoes.
Yeah. Somebody goes in and makes a change, and then somebody else goes and makes another change, and pretty soon those changes compile and it blows up, right? I mean, it falls over. So being able to know what the effects of those changes are, being able to vet that stuff out before any of those changes are made, and then be able to react to seeing that and resolving that and optimizing the performance in spite of that is kind of what the cloud convergence is what is all about.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Jimmy, I don't know if you have anything that you wanted to share with us today. I think this has been a great conversation. And I think, these conversations we're having on a weekly, bi-weekly basis have been very educational. I think that what you and Verge are doing is you're kind of almost leading a movement, right? So really trying to change not just what products people use, but you're also kind of trying to change their mentality and how they approach things and the paradigm,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. It's interesting. I guess in a lot of years working in this industry, I found that people get in their comfort zones and it's really hard to force people out. If you're used to doing it a certain way, and it doesn't matter if it's not efficient, it doesn't matter if it costs a lot of money, it works for you, right? So you're just doing it, right? But when you think about what's there in front of us today and you think about what AI intelligent IT management could do for managing your databases and applications over the next 5 years, it is truly exciting, right? In 5 years, intelligent IT management is going to be the norm versus the exception that is today. And the people that don't want to change are going to find themselves way behind the curve, right? Their costs are going to be higher. Their downtime is going to be greater. They're not going to be able to manage across their environments. And the people that are moving ahead and seeing that this is the future are going to be the winners, right? In the global race for the enterprise, in product launches and maturity and success are all going to be around how to automate and how to make IT management easier and smarter.
Right. Fantastic. Well, Jimmy, I think we're going to continue this conversation. Any last
So,
parting words before we conclude the episode for today?
well, I would encourage everyone to think, especially the people that are running operations, and think through how that you could manage those operations better and smarter through automation. And then think about, well, I can do that better through automation. So what is the best way to automate so that we can predict outcomes in the future and not react to broken systems, right? And take action before to prevent that system from going down or prevent that from happening. That's what predictive analytics, machine learning, and AI are going to provide IT management. So I would really encourage everyone to take a look at that, because that future is today, right? We can do this today. We don't have to wait 5 years.
Yeah, perfect. Well, thanks a lot, Jimmy. I think we're going to meet again very soon, and we'll see everybody on the next episode of the Verge Technologies podcast.
Thank you
See
very
you, my
much.
friend.
Thank you, Fernando.
Yeah.